Have you seen the movie Don John?
Dong Jong?
Don John. Don newer J-O-N.
Yeah, with J. Gordon Levitt.
Yes.
It's like the last thing he appeared in.
Yeah, because he directed it too. And that was like
Oh.
his like intro to like directing.
That's so embarrassing when like actors become directors and then
they immediately stop.
Yeah, everyone's like, oh, it was
No,
fine.
it had like 2 awards and then like 23 nominations or something.
Go on.
Okay, so the reason why I bring this up.
Julianne Moore plays a MILF in that, doesn't she?
Sure.
Okay.
I have no idea who that is. Like, there's very few actors that I can like sit there and be like, okay, I can like put a face to the name on that.
She's the one in the film Magnolia who's trying to pick up a prescription,
I
like
haven't
some
seen that
really
either.
powerful narcotics for her dying husband.
Yeah.
And the pharmacist is like, is this lady a drug addict? And she goes on this like tear, this like monologue for 2 minutes where she's like, fuck you, and the horse you rode in on, you goddamn. Oh, it's so good.
I want you to like, when you're editing this episode, just like have to go through and bleep all of those like F-bombs.
You know, Joseph Gordon-Levitt was writing his movie and trying to cast it, and he's like, I need a really powerful character actress to play the MILF.
Yeah.
Julianne Moore. You're going to bring so much intensity to this.
So Don John, it's described as a sex comedy. And you're like,
disagree.
What is a sex comedy? Okay, so the reason why I bring this up is because today, and this is my like official, intro / also trigger warning. We're talking about porn, and we're talking about parts of addiction today.
Our favorites. Natalie's
yeah.
bookmarks. We're going to expose it to the world. Patreon exclusive. You'll be able to see what we see.
Yeah.
Enjoy what we enjoy.
Is that that wasn't a period to that sentence. I was waiting for the end of that sentence.
I was hoping you'd cut me off.
So basically in this movie, Don John, his name is Joseph Gordon-Levitt in this movie plays the main character, Don John. And he is a New Jersey guy dedicated to his family, friends, and church, develops an unrealistic expectations from watching porn, and works to find happiness and intimacy with his potential true love. Who is his potential true love?
Julianne Moore.
No, it's Scarlett Johansson.
Wait, what?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, she's in this film.
Yeah. So the reason why I bring this up is because, like I mentioned, today we are talking about porn. And this movie is a great intro, Hollywood's way of like bringing in addiction as well as like finding intimacy. And Joel, I want you to cut me off and tell the audience who the fuck they're listening to, because I totally forgot. My intro became more of like a life lesson than it did a like anecdote. And to the audience, I'm sorry.
Sure. I'll introduce myself in just a second. I was trying to find the Wikipedia page for the movie Don John because I'm pretty sure his character's name is not Don John.
I'm pretty sure his it's like Donald Johnson or something like that.
But I did find the 1995...
his nickname is Don John, but his name is just John Martello.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. What I did find was the movie Don John DeMarco, a 1995 American romantic comedy drama film starring Johnny Depp as John Arnold DeMarco, a man who believes himself to be Don John, the greatest lover in the world. Clad in a cape and a domino mask, DeMarco undergoes psychiatric treatment with Marlon Brando's character to cure him of his apparent delusion.
Yeah, because when I'm reading this NPR episode, I took this from NPR. This like these little notes. It says Don John is the nickname his pals gave him him in the movie's obvious nod to Don Juan and Giovanni.
Yes, which, teen boys are always comparing people
He's
to
not supposed to be
famous
a teen.
1787
He's not supposed to be a teen.
German operas.
Welcome back to Why Would No One Date These Guys. We are back in the studio, and by studio I mean Joel's kitchen. We're surrounded by cats, and we're back in person. How exciting. First time in a month.
Our listeners can't wait to hear more crappy audio.
Yeah.
That's what they're here for. The 20 or so people who listen to our episodes, they like the raw, realistic
I feel
audio.
like 20 is pushing it.
That's true.
Yeah.
They don't like that fake, like, auto-tune Joe Rogan bullshit. They want the real shit.
But what I get out of this is I actually get to try the drink with you this week. And this week we're trying Zia Sandia, watermelon, mint, and lime.
I don't know if this is going to be good. I don't know.
Okay.
We've tried a couple of these, and I think we've been, like, interesting, but
I'm drinking it out of a tiki cup just
sugar.
for, like, a full picture of what's going on. Oh, that's absolutely atrocious.
It's Okay, I think we said last time these drinks need more sugar. It's the same for this one.
It kind of tastes like it has caffeine in it for some reason.
This is like a watermelon soda, but they've removed the sugar, so you get the like
It's supposed
faint
to have
fruity taste of
cane sugar.
watermelon.
It said it has 21 grams of sugar. I don't believe that.
I think we complained about this last time. We
Yeah.
tried the root beer or something. I keep wanting to enjoy this brand because it's like a New Mexico whatever.
Why
but
would we want to support New Mexico?
That's a really good point.
Yeah,
I don't even support Old Mexico.
exactly.
Whoa, Naomi, put yourself in a box there, didn't you? Yeah, so we're a podcast about sex, dating, relationships, and occasionally Naomi's Pornhub history. This time, Naomi has some stuff to talk about with me. I've sort of been putting together an episode about porn the last couple of months, and I have some stuff I might add, but really, this is Naomi's shebang.
Usually it's Joel's shebang, and I just go along with it. But this time he's gonna listen to me spew nonsense.
This
for an
time,
hour.
I'm going to be texting during the entire episode.
I don't text during our episodes. I just mildly look casually at my text messages. So the reason why I bring up this movie, and I'll circle back to it, is there's this new trend going on. And it started with, okay, I don't know if it started, but the person that made it popular was this woman named Jordan Kerr. I think I'm saying her name wrong, but for animosity and also the reasons of this podcast not wanting to get sued for the full $5 that we get every month, I'm just going to leave it at that. So she started this new trend on TikTok and also Instagram, because her TikTok and her Instagram reels are the same thing. And the TikTok name, if you want to look into this yourself, is That's Not Love, all one word. Instagram is That's an Addiction. And these accounts are run by this woman, Jordan, who recently found out, I think it was like 11 months ago, that her husband has a porn addiction.
Okay.
Joel's just blankly looking at me right now. I was waiting for oh my God. How dare he?
I mean, we've talked about the stats before. Like, researchers have looked and they can't find any male who's like, I've never seen pornography.
Oh, yeah, we'll get into statistics.
Okay.
So instead of her admitting that her husband was not respecting her boundaries, she decided to take to social media and openly shame her marriage, her husband, and others struggling from porn addictions.
I can't wait till I'm married and that's how I can solve every argument.
Yeah, you're like, oh, the reason why I actually put a ring on your finger was so that later on I can,
Yeah. I'm going to go on Am I the Asshole and phrase all of our problems so that they always sound like I'm the victim.
As you should. King behavior. King.
Thank you.
Thing. So this goes so far as to share that she's incredibly insecure in intimate moments in her relationship, blah, 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 because she's consistently comparing herself to other women that he's gotten off to in the pornographic sense. So I'm just going to briefly share my personal thoughts on this, because I would like to mention why I'm bringing this up today. One of the first reasons why I decided to bring this up is because I work a lot with people that struggle from substance abuse. I work with people actively, my coworkers, as well as people that are patients. And I would say that I am not a healthcare professional in the sense that I cannot give you valid advice for how to deal with your addiction, but I feel like I've witnessed it enough to be like, this isn't the best way to go about, having a partner that has an addiction. Call me crazy. So I don't think that that's my view of the way that she's sharing her account, is that she's openly shaming her husband. But also, why would you want to be with someone that makes you insecure and has broken your boundaries and you feel like they've fucked up your marriage and your life? But call me crazy. She'll openly share videos of her crying or turning a mirror around in their bedroom because she can't look at herself, things of that nature. But then she's just stopped the discourse from others on social media. This is down to the point where she will block other people that are like, oh, well, you shouldn't be doing this, or they have a negative opinion, or they have a different opinion than hers. She blocks everyone that speaks up defending addiction and her husband and how he needs help. And she also wants to target other women that are in the same situation, and even just let their husbands or their partners watch porn in the first place. So she'll go as far as saying oh, you're not cool. You're not a cool girl if you check women out with your husband, and you're not cool if you let your husband watch porn and things of that nature. So she's not it's not just her relationship that she's, going after. It's also everybody else's.
Sure. Can I step in for a second?
Go ahead.
What you're describing sounds very similar to most social media influencers.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that, like, oh, well, we can't discuss this. It's just, you look at, like, trad wife influencers, and they're constantly making posts about how women who work in the office aren't real women. And if you're not raising your kids to respect, the way of the chicken or whatever, that, you're not a real mom. And, you see fitness influencers who are talking all about how to diet properly. And if you're not, eating chicken and creatine and everything for every meal, you're not a real workout junkie. And I think she's applying very similar tactics to this issue of like sex addiction or porn addiction or like unhappy people in their marriages,
Yeah.
where she's trying to say, you're not going to have a successful marriage if you, allow your husband to do these things, which may or may not be true, but it's just the same tired mantra of I believe my worldview applies to everyone and everyone would be happier if they adopted it. And there's not really a lot of room for criticism, as you're saying, when some people might comment and say things like, well, I enjoy watching pornography and my boyfriend enjoys watching pornography and our sex life has benefited because of it, so on and so forth. So yeah, like it's fascinating how many different like specific niches influencers can get into, and I have to wonder, how sustainable the ecosystem is, because I don't think you can fit more than a couple people who have this specific niche into, TikTok, Instagram, whatever.
It just seems like, and I don't know the specific like term for it, and I don't want to put a label, like a psychological label of like, oh, like I'm a therapist and I can label things. But it just seems like she was betrayed in this situation and her partner now has to jump through hoops and he has to have his marriage put on blast because of something that he participated in and now hypothetically has under control. And I have an issue with it because she to this day has controlled his behavior to the point where like she gave an example where they like went to go see the movie Oppenheimer, and in Oppenheimer they have that like one scene where there's some nudity.
Yeah.
And there was apparently she was describing how there was an on and off scene where it was like, okay, there was a sex scene or nudity or something, and then it jumped back into something else and fast forwarded and things like that. And she was sharing how it made her uncomfortable, just the nudity, to the point where and it was a sex scene or something where she made her husband like turn around and like face a different direction so that he like couldn't even watch that, because that made her like feel like that was feeding into it.
The other thing I'm sort of picturing is like every so often you'll see like a mom trying to like shame their kid in public, and that blows up and it goes viral.
Yeah.
Like, I caught him sneaking out at night, and she, takes photos of the kid like wearing a big sign around his neck.
Yeah.
Or, this kid, had got a B in, social studies or whatever, and they try to humiliate their kid. And I feel it's kind of a form of bullying. It's kind of a form of sadism. And I don't know how the relationship lasts, because clearly like trust has been broken so immeasurably she can never trust her husband again. And the husband knows that no matter what he does, no matter how good he acts, his like whatever he does is always going to be questioned. If he's at work and there's an attractive new coworker, he's going to be afraid of interacting with that woman for fear that his wife is going to, think poorly. Or if he's watching a movie by himself and suddenly nudity comes on, he's like, oh crap, and, has to close it and move it on. Yeah, I mean, at the point where you think your relationship is like so immeasurably damaged, you have to be constantly like babysitting your partner, like, I don't even know if therapy is sufficient for that. It feels like
you have to get rid of the whole husband. You have to get rid of the whole marriage.
He went over some boundary that is like impossible to fix in her mind, and I don't see what she gets out of this besides a feeling of like satisfaction.
I think the best way to put it is like it's very sadist, like having this sense of like control over the situation, and maybe that just is her reaction to not having control over the situation for so long.
But I think also you have this problem where, for lack of a better term, she's bullying her husband.
Yeah.
And she's on social media and can get tens of thousands of people
Yeah.
who approve of that behavior backing her up.
Because she's also not alone in this.
Right.
Like I would say she's the most popular, the one that comes up most on my feed, and that's why I bring up her specific accounts. But it doesn't seem like she's alone in this mindset of, oh, porn ruins all relationships. And she goes so far as to say, like, oh, every single man that watches porn. She doesn't say every single person. She says every single man turns into a pedophile or ends up like basically in incestuous situations, because that's all that porn portrays.
Yeah, so I think the problem is, you can find whatever opinions you want on the internet. If you go
Yeah.
searching for someone to validate you, you will find that, and clearly she's found validation. And so it's going to be very difficult to convince this woman that her worldview is wrong when she has, again, tens of thousands of people backing her up. If you want to say, criticize your husband, I'm not saying this is a good thing, but like, keep it confined to your social circle and see how people around you react. And if your friends and family are looking at you and being like, maybe you're going a little too far, that's when you should step back and reevaluate.
Yeah.
But if you immediately put him on blast and bring it to the world, suddenly this man is going to, I don't know, career issues and whatnot.
Yeah.
Which, maybe sometimes there are acts that people commit that should cause them to have future career issues. But the idea, again, that this person, was browsing Pornhub or something, and now like half the women on the planet know his existence, that's a little weird.
It's definitely weird, because she said that she didn't know about the addiction for like 10 plus years or something like that, and she went and had been using other people's examples, I'm assuming just from like Reddit or other forms of social media, where she was like, oh, well, somebody told me that their husband was, off like masturbating while she was giving birth or something like that. And it was like, okay, I understand why that's problematic. But she like goes as so far as to like share those intimate details about her life, and shares like ring camera footage, not ring camera, but just like camera footage. They have cameras up in their house of her just like crying and sobbing. And I think it's the satisfaction that she gets from getting people on her side, and like, oh, well, maybe if my husband understands like that everybody else on my social media that I haven't blocked has, backed me up in this, that he'll understand how big of an issue it is, and blah, blah, blah. But no, you're completely right. It is bullying. So I'm going to move past this woman, because we don't need to like spend any more time on her. But my solution to this problem is get rid of the whole marriage. Just throw it all away. Just you're done. You're done. Just get rid of it. Like it's the fact that, yes, he broke boundaries and there's not a sense of trust there, but it's also the way that she's been dealing with the repairing of that relationship is utterly disgusting to me.
Yes, she's turned her psychological concerns over the state of the marriage into a full-time job.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I wonder if she makes good money.
I wonder, but yeah, it's definitely interesting to see the new content that she puts out every day, because to me, like, I know people in my personal life that have struggled from something that they call porn addiction, which to me, I don't even feel like it can be, like, I was doing research on this while putting this like outline together for this episode, and they're still trying to figure out if it's even considered an addiction.
I did want to talk about that.
Yeah. And so it's kind of hard for me to sit back and be like, oh yeah, this is a real and thing. Like, I understand, okay, yes, like you can have a hard time, getting it up with your partner in real life if you have a heavy dependence on that form of stimulation. But at the same time, it's kind of hard for me to sit down and be like, okay, yeah, this is definitely an addiction, when all I've ever heard about it is the church's sense of this is an addiction.
Right. Interesting things have happened ever since people have begun offloading their brains and lives onto the internet.
Yeah.
Like, it's a weird concept to talk about, because for a while humans have been like offloading brain functions to computers, right? Like the very act of like using a calculator, or the act of using like a search engine, or the act of using a note-taking app, is you are no longer using your memory. You are relying upon another entity in order to solve a problem for you, or to like keep track of your life.
Yeah.
And social media adds this other element where, people up until, the 1990s, maybe late 80s, functionally could only work through their issues by talking to their inner self, or by talking to others in their social circle.
Yeah.
And so that's good and bad because I think the internet has exposed people to a lot of different opinions from a
Mm-hmm.
variety of cultures and belief systems and backgrounds that if, grow up in a rural part of America, for instance, you would never be exposed to. And so you can see kind of the emergence of all these queer individuals around the world who recognize that they're not alone, they don't have to keep their thoughts to themselves. There's others like them and they can feel okay with their identity. But you also have this weird thing where like people feel the need to, rather than like emotionally deal with their problems, to make it everyone else's problem, to
Yeah.
advertise it to the world. And you see this with like bad celebrity breakups online. You see this with like feuding business owners. I know Dave Portnoy, is that his name?
Yeah.
I saw an
Barstool owner.
article, yeah, where
Yeah.
like he and a owner of a pizza shop got into a fight when he was reviewing their pizza recently, and so then he like bragged about this online and got a bunch of his followers like send this guy bomb threats. And it's like that's really dangerous and psychotic behavior. Again, we're, rather than having to justify something to your internal self and work through it and mentally process it, you assume you're right and you have the validation immediately of tens of thousands of people. And I don't think this is true for everyone who uses the internet. And a lot of people, they use social media, but they don't post. They just kind of consume content passively. They're not trying to, make their own personal issues everyone else's problems. But yeah, it's fascinating. And, the complications of adding an AI make things even weirder because you could have tens of thousands of bots validating you, not even real humans, not even,
Yeah.
other people with similar value systems, completely made up value systems that are programmed for whatever you want. Oh, good stuff.
Yeah. I want to circle back to this like idea that it's not necessarily a addiction, and I want to kind of pick your brain on this. To me, when I meet people that openly share with me that they have a porn addiction, it's mainly just because they have grown up in a religious household or they're currently a part of a religion that thinks that having any form of lust or, you know, intimate feelings towards another person that isn't, the one true love of your life is a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it doesn't feel like this is necessarily as big of an issue as it is, but I would still like to share some things, and you're welcome to share your thoughts on this as well. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I would really like to dig into, I don't feel like it's necessarily as big of an issue as, like, I firmly believe that there is an issue with the porn industry in the United States. I firmly believe. Here's my hot take.
Ooh.
But I don't think that what we label as a porn addiction is actually porn addiction.
I agree. And I think we don't need to rely just on our own personal convictions. I have an article from Business Insider, which I know, but it was peer reviewed by Rosara Torrisi, a LCSW, CST, MSSW, MED, PhD, a certified sex therapist at the Long Island Institute of Sex Therapy. And I guess the first thing is pornography addiction is not recognized by the American Psychological Association as a mental health problem or disorder like drug or alcohol addiction.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to mean it isn't. It just means that like a group of people multiple times has gotten together and looked at the evidence and said, we do not believe there is compelling enough evidence to categorize it as one of those things.
But that's because a study of men who sought treatment for problematic pornography use, or PPU, showed that their brains did not respond to sexual images.
What do you mean by that?
So when you get, this was a study that is also talked about in the World Health Organization talked about this. They had a study in 2018 of, it doesn't say how many people in this article, but when they got together and they were talking to men that suffered from problematic porn usage, it showed that their brains didn't even respond in the same way to that addiction that drugs and alcohol have on the brain.
This article talks about this as well. So like certain substances such as alcohol will actually change your brain chemistry, and porn does not do that. It does not affect your brain. It doesn't stop the release of dopamine, where you have to get bigger and bigger fixes in order to achieve the same amount of dopamine release. What researchers have been able to conclude, and this may not be true for all people who consume pornography, but for a lot of people who identify as compulsive porn addicts, they think it is more closely related to compulsive, obsessive, or habitual behavior than substance abuse or addiction.
Okay.
If you, for instance, tend to watch porn when you're feeling lonely or upset, that's more of a compulsion or a habit, right? Your brain triggers, upset hormones, and you're like, oh, well, I know how to immediately get some dopamine. I have access to porn on my phone, on my computer, whatever. And I think similarly, one could argue that you can see signs of addictive behavior in like people who obsessively follow OnlyFans models and spend crazy amounts of money, racking
Yeah.
up huge amounts of debt. But I'd argue that like could very much just be related to the loneliness epidemic we have in our society,
Yeah.
where people form these internet problem,
Yeah.
parasocial connections with influencers. They see them as highly desirable. They hope that they can get closer to them than whatever public facing persona these influencers put on, and so they invest huge amounts of money hoping for an eventual payoff. And I don't know if that's like actually addictive behavior or just like sad lonely people doing what sad lonely people sometimes do.
Yeah.
I'm willing to be convinced that there is some ability for porn to be addictive, but I just think that the evidence right now does not indicate that.
I think there's definitely something to say about, the problematic side of porn, where, the ugly side of it that we're seeing a lot of, issues with, issues with all people, but you see it most in the news when it comes to like the Duggar family controversy, for instance, where he like had child porn on his computer and stuff. So I think that there's definitely a different side of that we don't necessarily, that brings a different side of it into things, but at the same time, I don't even want to touch on that or label that at all.
I will. I want to talk about this.
Go ahead then. Go ahead.
I think when you obsessively stigmatize the very concept of sexuality, where you obsessively stigmatize the idea of like consuming pornography or like having sex out of wedlock, people associate it with something that's like really bad, really evil, really dark.
Yeah.
And the same article I was reading mentions that there was a large 2020 study published by the APA that found that people's cultural, moral, or religious beliefs may lead them to believe they're addicted to pornography.
I
even if they
don't like how
actually
you're
watch
taking
a
all
lot
my
of porn.
freaking articles.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'll
You're
stop
a
citing
bitch.
stuff. But when someone who is, say, deeply religious watches porn for the first time, and they don't get struck by lightning,
Yeah.
and they don't lose
And their
their
penis
job the
doesn't
next
fall
day, and their
off.
penis doesn't fall off,
And they don't catch chlamydia and they don't die.
They're like, oh, well, one of two things. Either this is like not as bad as I thought,
Yeah.
and then they don't know like what appropriate boundaries are, because all porn is bad, so it doesn't
Yeah.
matter what porn you're watching, it's all bad. Or they think, I guess it's just the one. Never mind. So yeah, like I think, unfortunately, people who have strong cultural aversions to porn might not think that consuming harmful types of pornography, those that like are clearly exploitative, are as bad as people who don't have that. Because people who are raised in this idea that there's like, oh yeah, there's like nude ladies on the internet and sometimes you can gain pleasure by looking at them, right? They don't have this idea that like consuming porn is bad. They don't have like the perception that what they're doing is wrong. And they can sort of understand the idea that maybe there are types of content that I should not be consuming, that is worse than this thing. They're not all on the same like playing field.
I think that's an interesting way of exploring the topic, because I definitely would agree that like when talking about like, okay, let me bring up a personal example. I had a friend in high school whose older brother suffered from what was labeled a porn addiction. And so every night at like 8 or 9 p.m., his dad would just like cut off the Wi-Fi. And so like he couldn't.
You said
like,
cut off, and I was concerned.
And so this kid's dad would cut off the Wi-Fi every single night. And so everybody in the house had to suffer, but also everybody at the same time every night had to think about this guy's porn addiction. I just thought about that. But just, dang it! He can't watch Netflix after 9 because of this guy. But it's like, it's not going to stop anything. You know what I mean? Like, you can watch porn at any time during the day. The Wi-Fi's still on. You know what I mean? So it's kind of hard for me to sit here and be like, that was a good idea. But the reason why I bring that up is because... Are you just silently cursing?
No, I love that. That's great.
But at the same time, it's just, it's interesting to me because I knew that the main reason why it was behind it, because there was a lot of shame surrounding that.
Mm-hmm.
And like I mentioned, I don't know if it's just because you're not supposed to lust after anyone that's not your one true love, or if it's because lust is seen as a sin, and lust is seen as this like, you should not be doing this, and over many hundreds of women, because obviously when you're on like porn sites, it's okay, you have one video and then the next day you have a different video, so it's always like a different person, unless you have your favorite porn star, you know. I'm not going to shame you for having a favorite porn star, but it's hundreds if not thousands of women. So it's interesting to see that like there's this emphasis on shaming. So then I was like, okay, let me look into like the faith aspect of this. So I was like, okay, let me look into like porn shaming. So I'm looking into porn shaming, and I fell upon this article that was talking about like what not to do when you catch your child watching porn. And it was by this like Christian website or whatever. And the first thing was like, don't shame them. Allow them to realize that like it's okay that like this happened, but never do it again, and like wag your finger at them. So you're basically just saying like, oh yeah, like this is a thing and this is cool, but at the same time, don't freaking do it ever again. So what I think you're completely correct in saying that like this whole shame thing is the reason why, because there's no balance.
Yeah. And I think we're talking about this in like a very theoretical, clinical way, but like the idea that porn is bad can have like serious real world repercussions. Did you want to talk at all about like the no-fap movement, if that's something that you had in your outline?
I didn't necessarily have that, but I was going to talk about like sexual exploitation and like the darker side of,
Well, can I talk a little bit about the no-fap movement for a second?
Ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Slate had an article about the no-fap movement in July of 2023, written by Will McCurdy, published at 7 p.m. I don't know why I need to know that, but that's in the article header. So the article talks a little bit about the no-fap movement. And the no-fap movement started in about 2006. It was on a popular message board of places like bodybuilding.com. And the first people who were like, you should not masturbate, period, were those who were interested in like increasing the testosterone in your body.
Yeah.
It was like, well, if you don't release your like vital essence through masturbation, you're going to get better muscle gains. And initially when it was brought up, people were like, if you just want to get jacked, you can't masturbate. You have to like avoid the temptation and like pump your arms at the gym until you can no longer lift them and be tempted, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like a health optimization thing, similar to like adding creatine or like doing high intensity workout training. But then it morphed into this thing that I started seeing on Reddit around like the 2010s, 2012s. And it became a subreddit where people were like told, hey, never masturbate, and they would share tips, and they would like get badges for like reporting that they hadn't masturbated for a certain period of time, and they would spread a lot of information, I might say misinformation, about the impacts of pornography. So some of the things that no-fappers talk about is things like porn are bad, porn's going to make you weaker, you're supporting human trafficking, you need to focus on things like semen retention, which will give you increased confidence, more success with women, greater pheromones, more energy, less anxiety.
It'll help your prostate health.
It'll help your prostate health, which is interesting because I think the latest research indicates that like masturbating 2 times a week or ejaculating 2 times a week is better for your prostate than not masturbating at all.
Gotta milk the cow.
Thank you, Naomi. But here's the thing. When you start talking about all of the benefits of like not masturbating, and you talk about all the downsides, like, oh, the reason you can't get women is because women think you're a loser because you masturbate all the time. People tend to internalize that.
Yeah.
And that has serious real-world repercussions. In a recent study, 28.9% of users on the NoFap subreddit said that they felt suicidal following their most recent masturbation session.
Yeah.
5% reported feeling extremely suicidal. So I would imagine that a lot of people drawn to this are probably men. I think there are some women on the group, but like it's going to be mostly men. And these men, most likely, the reason they masturbate a lot, not necessarily true, but the reason they masturbate a lot is because they're single. And they're told by this group, the reason they're single, the reason they're lonely, the reason they can't attract women is because they masturbate. And when they do masturbate, they start punishing themselves mentally. They start attacking themselves mentally. They think that they have no self-control. They think that they're worthless. All of their negative emotions that are not tied to the act of like sex per se, but are tied to the other problems going on in their life well up, and they experience these issues. And I think that there's a healthy way, quote unquote, of approaching this idea that like, oh, you're going to have I don't know, better erections, better gains at the gym if like you're not masturbating as much. I think
Yeah.
there's positive messages, but this article from Slate also mentions that there's now like a very strong religious element to this, where a lot of, religious individuals, people who were raised Catholic, people who were raised Muslim, are trying to join this group to find a community of support because they were told as a child that like
This
they
was
would be bad
shameful.
if they did this, and
Yeah.
it was probably untrue that their parents didn't masturbate. It was
Yeah.
probably untrue that people in their faith group in their community didn't masturbate. But they had this perception that that was true and that there's people out there who've proven it can work. And so now they're looking for tips and advice on how to be that good person.
There's also the tie-in of Proud Boys. Like Lauren and I were chatting last week about someone that I had met that did not masturbate and did not watch porn and only like got off when he was like with someone.
Mm-hmm.
And so Lauren was like, is this a Proud Boy? And I was like, I don't know, but that's really scary that you brought that up.
Yeah.
Because that was something that we talked about on like an episode in the past. Like having this like group of like, oh, you like cannot masturbate and like you got to keep all your testosterone inside.
I do want to mention just quickly 3 other things from this Slate article that are very interesting. One of the big things that no fat people talk about is how you'll have better erections when you're not masturbating.
Yeah.
And they mention, the fact that I believe there's been like a 25% rise in erectile dysfunction among young men in recent years. And like this is probably due to people like just constantly jacking it and becoming
Also,
desensitized.
sperm count's really low because of vaping.
So that's a good point. Sperm count's going down. I don't know if it's due to vaping,
No,
but like
there's a recent study that
testosterone
just came out
levels
the other day.
around like the world are declining. There's also the fact that they've done studies. So like there was a gentleman who did a study about a reboot. He had people not masturbate or view erotic material, and those people had more issues with erectile dysfunction than those who didn't. Where it's like, oh, if you're touching your penis less or touching your genitals less in general, you may have difficulty like responding to stimulation. You might not like be in the right headspace. Another thing that's brought up is a lot more people are on prescription medication, especially for things like ADHD.
Ooh.
And they cite one example of a gentleman who consulted with a doctor and found that he had weak erections due to high doses of prescription ADHD medicine, Vyvanse. So, like, this...
That and also, like, bipolar medication, antidepressants, and anti-anxiety medication all also do that as well.
Yeah. And then like the article I should finally mention, it's not just like risk of suicide. There have been at least 3 real life suicides tied directly to the no fat movement. So in 2015, one example was there was a prominent no fat moderator who believed she was a lesbian and was trying to suppress these urges. She thought pornography had made her gay. So she posted about coming out to her husband as a lesbian, and then 25 hours later, she died by suicide. So yeah, real world consequences.
Wow.
Talk to a therapist, people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or better yet, talk to your community.
Yeah, don't talk to your Reddit community.
And again, this is outsourcing your brain to the internet. This is you outsourcing your problems to the internet. Where again, sometimes it can be good if you have like a random health issue and other people around the world have this relatively rare random health issue. Sometimes they can help you diagnose it. Other times they can completely mislead you. And then you're left in the lurch or taking, I don't know, horse tranquilizers in order to cure your COVID, right? Like, there's good and there's bad. I'm not going to broad brush these things, but it's just a very weird time to be in.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so we talked about a lot of topics, and I just want to wrap it back around to Don John.
We're only at 37 minutes, Naomi.
Yeah, but I'm wrapping it back around to Don John.
Oh, okay. We're not finishing. I see.
Don John.
Don't finish in this episode.
Let me give just like a brief understanding. So there's this guy,
JGL.
Yes. And he's known for being close to his family and a womanizer. And I don't know why I put those two together as always describe him back to back. Close to his family, goes to the gym, good looking guy, womanizer, doesn't have a long-term relationship, blah, 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 played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt. And in this, he plays a prolific seducer named John Martello. Don John is the nickname his pals gave him. And those literary namesakes end up in hell, but for this, John, the hell is during sex. He has regular one-night stands, but he's miserable. In a voiceover, he complains at length about the missionary position because he hates having to look at women's faces. He can't, he says, lose himself. So while he conquests slumbers, I guess that's his way of saying that. Oh, and where so while he conquests slumber, he turns on his computer and watches porn. So he finds out that he meets this woman. They are at a club. She dances on him. He says, "What's your name?" And she said, "Pfft," and leaves. And he has to, go about his life and find her in a different way, take her on a date. They meet. They're sharing his life together. He's a Catholic. They go to church. He meets the family. Blah blah blah. And turns out that she is basically just shaping him into the perfect man. So he's a good looking guy. He is very he's very close to this family, but she's like, you have to go back to church, you have to get a good job, and we're gonna get married, and we're gonna have a nice family, and we're gonna have a nice life. And all this comes crashing down one day when she goes to bed early and he's up and he's watching porn. So she catches him. And he said, "Oh, well, it's not like that. Like, I was just, trying to find a fix, blah, blah, blah." And she's like, "No, I'm done with you." And just leaves. So she obviously has an issue with his porn, watching, I should say. I was about to say addiction because that's all we've been saying all episode is porn addiction. And she goes about this and she's like, "I'm done with you. It's either you or it's either me or porn or blah, blah, blah." And so he has to, at the end of the movie, he obviously picks her and he's like, "I'm never going to do that again, blah, blah, blah." Again, shaming the porn usage because it's obviously bad and she only wants him to lust after her. This is relating back to the initial theme of what we were talking about with this influencer who is talking about how a man should not ever lust after somebody who is not, I hate that I'm using that as a term. It sounds very biblical.
Yeah, lusts after.
Yeah. No man should ever should only lust after his partner and his wife, and he should not be watching porn, and he should not be looking at other women, and he should only desire me. I feel like that's problematic, and I would like to talk about that. Okay. So my thoughts are that is problematic because I wouldn't say that it's a bad thing if your partner thinks that somebody else is attractive. I think it's the way that they act on that.
Oh, I thought we were talking about how the Catholicism was the problematic part. My
that
bad.
Too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of women who have had not great relationships with men. And the same can be true. There's a lot of men who have not great relationships with women, and a lot of men who have had not great relationships with men, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And I think people who leave a relationship where there have been abusive tendencies or breaches of trust want to establish better boundaries in the future. Or they don't, and that creates its own problems, where they repeat the same habits. They think that becoming more of a doormat, they can, attract more people, they won't lose their partner, so on and so forth. But yeah, I think a lot of people are like, I'm going to be savvy this time. I'm going to set, boundaries so I don't get my trust voided again. And I think they set these boundaries without thinking how these boundaries are going to impact the relationship. I think if you said straight up at the front of the relationship, I expect all these things from you, a lot of people would be turned off even if they completely agreed with it, because putting limitations on your partner's behavior is bad. But they also set the boundaries without thinking about what are emotionally healthy boundaries. And I think it's totally fine to have boundaries in a relationship. I think it's totally fine to have expectations in a relationship. But these things should be mutually agreed upon by both partners, and something that's constantly reaffirmed, so both partners understand that they're not putting, unreasonable burdens on the other person. And I think one example might be checking partners' cell phones kind of icks me out.
Yeah.
I can understand that someone who has been cheated on before might have the fervent desire to be constantly on top of whatever their partner is doing.
You shouldn't be in a relationship. You should heal before doing that.
Sure, but I can imagine there being a relationship where there's someone who really wants to see what's on their partner's cell phone, and one person who has nothing to hide and is A-okay with that. He's yeah, sure, whatever. And I think by talking with your partner, by treating them as someone who is worthy of being listened to, you can figure out what are appropriate boundaries for this relationship near the start of a relationship. On either my third or fourth date with Lauren. Like, I talked about some of the things that were important to me in a relationship. One of the things I mentioned that I wasn't, let's be clear, was not important to me in a relationship, but I thought might be weird was, oh yeah, by the way, I'm living with my sister right now. We share a apartment because housing is horrible and the housing market is insane.
I thought you just liked me.
I lied to you about what?
No, I thought you just liked living with me. I thought that's why we lived together, you fucking bitch.
Of course, Naomi, that too. But yeah, like, I think it's important because, like, everyone's going to have weird quirks and intricacies, and some things are negotiable and some things are non-negotiable, and it's okay to have standards, but don't create these standards in such a way that you're, like, manipulating or abusing your partner. Yeah, I mean, I think, if I recall the film properly, are we going to go through the whole thing? Can I spoil the ending?
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, yeah, like, Scarlett Johansson's character gets, like, horribly mortified because she catches
Don
John. I keep wanting to say Dong Jong. Watching porn, and he, they separate. I think she goes to live with her sister or whatever. And near the end of the film, like, they discuss this, and she's like, "Look, maybe my beliefs and whatnot are, like, unrealistic, but I want this perfect man, as you were talking about." And they split. And she's also like, "Don't ever call me again." And then Joseph Gordon-Levitt goes and has sex with hot MILF Julianne Moore. I guess that's the moral of the story. Sometimes you gotta... You know who Julianne Moore is. She's been in everything. She plays a lot of villains these days.
Oh!
Yeah.
He has sex with her?
Yeah.
Good for him.
Which, again, when you're writing and directing a film and you get to cast the film, you can't help but think, JGL, did you want to make out with Scarlett Johansson and Julianne Moore in the same film?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, Julianne Moore, it's really important that we both be nude in bed for this scene.
This is king shit right here. This is beautiful.
Maybe, I don't know. This also reminds me of, like, abusive Hollywood men who would use their power to, like, manipulate.
I was thinking of it in nice rainbow terms. Not,
yeah. So yeah, it's whatever. Some people are going to have these expectations. If you don't like these expectations, don't enter in a relationship with these people, or, make it clear that, like, these are probably not going to be things that you want to follow. I think a lot of people, if they're in a healthy, nurturing relationship, might respond positively if, like, they see a partner who's not doing the same things that led them suspicion. But I think there's other people, like the woman who we mentioned at the start of the episode, who have been, like, permanently scarred by whatever experience they went through, and now their entire life is focused around both shaming their husband and, like, reacting to how the world evolves around pornography.
I feel like it's definitely, she has more of a parental role in that relationship now.
That's a kink thing.
That definitely could be.
You think she spanks him?
Why would you say that?
A parental role, her, like, wanting to punish her husband.
I feel like
her having negative attitudes towards sex. Oh, it's all tied together. Do you think they have sex?
Yeah, like, I'm thinking, like, I've thought about this extensively. Like, do you think that is something that is, like, a part of their relationship now? Or do you think she's just like, no, I can't even take my clothes off in front of him?
Either that's, like, a kink thing, or, yeah, like, if I'm the husband and I've just, like, spent the day having friends text me being like, saw that latest post, boy, you're in the doghouse now, I would not want to be intimate with my partner.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just me, but I would like to be intimate with people who respect me, call me crazy.
No, you crazy bitch.
Yeah. And you have to wonder, if this person went 10 years without his wife finding out that he watched pornography.
Yeah.
If, like, he's just gotten better at hiding it.
She called it D-Day when she found out.
Look, I'm not even, like, a big support our troops guy, and that seems disrespectful.
Yeah, so I don't know. I would like to wrap up this episode because I don't have much more to say about this, and I feel like
I have things to say.
Go ahead.
I have other stuff.
Go.
Did you want to do your little spiel?
I mean, go ahead. What do you have to say? Mainly, a lot of mine is just I'm talking about how porn is not an addiction and how there's a lot of studies that show that. But you kind of took my freaking thunder with that. But okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm well researched.
Bitch.
Damn, Naomi. So I saw an article earlier.
Go ahead.
So I get, like, the Google articles in my, phone feed. You swipe to the left and Android shows you articles.
Yeah.
And I've done a really good job of, like, getting rid of all of the news sites and like topics that don't interest me. And now all I get is like cooking recommendations,
As you should.
Phoenix specific news, and information on new apps and like dating stuff.
So it's like banana pie recipe and then like crash
Banana
on
Pie,
on
the gay dating
67th
app.
Street.
That too, yeah. And I saw this article from Politico, I believe, came out today, September 7th, 12:40 p.m. CET. Your car wants to know about your sex life.
I'm sorry, what?
Car manufacturers are collecting troves of data on drivers and passengers, some even tracking drivers' sexual activity, according to a new report. In a review of 25 car brands and 15 car companies published by Mozilla Foundation on Wednesday, researchers found that the Japanese car manufacturer Nissan said it could sell information about drivers and passengers' sexual activity, intelligence, and health diagnoses to data brokers, law enforcement agencies, and other companies. German manufacturer Volkswagen said it could record drivers' voices to profile them for targeted ads. Now, this is Firefox. Mozilla is very much about like privacy.
Yeah.
So like I can understand that like there may be a little bit of bias, but they're presenting some pretty straightforward information. So Cal Trider, who's a researcher at Mozilla, Jin Coltrider, lead researcher at Mozilla, looked at car companies' privacy policies and downloaded their apps in Germany, France, the United States, Japan, and South Korea. How do you think car companies gather information about people having sex within the cars?
Movement/recording.
Interesting. So they found the industry hoovered up massive amounts of data through dozens of sensors and technology built into newer car models that calculate people's weight as they sit down, film the car inside and out with cameras, listen to conversations through microphones, and track users via connected apps on their smartphones.
Do you know how many teenagers will be having to have sex out in the woods again?
Oh God, there's going to be a rise in bear deaths.
Yeah.
Unintended consequences.
Yeah.
So that's interesting because you can imagine, okay, we know that a person sitting down in this seat weighs approximately, let's say, 220 pounds.
Yeah.
Oh, now there's 400 pounds worth of data on this seat.
Ooh. But what happens if you so there's been an instance where there was 5 of us in a car and then there was groceries just on me in the passenger seat.
Were there, Naomi? Were there really? There wasn't just a 5-person orgy going on. But yeah, like the idea that they have cameras on the inside, they have, whatever the car equivalent of Alexa is.
Why would you want to buy a car with cameras inside of it?
That's a real good question. Maybe for like child monitoring? Maybe that's a feature in new cars?
No, because you can buy a separate child monitor.
Oh, good God. When you leave your kid in the hot car, you want to know how much time you have.
You're right.
Before expiration.
Yeah.
Yeah, so researchers found that 84% of the car brands reviewed could share and sell data to other companies like data brokers, a market estimated in the hundreds of billions of euros. And basically, no one knows this is going on. A lot of car companies don't have like a terms of service. Subaru, for instance, says the very fact of being a passenger in one of its cars implies consenting to the privacy policy, which is really interesting.
Hold on, because usually when you enter a website where it's like, we're going to track your data now, you have to click a button. When you buy a Subaru now, do you have to sign a paper or click a button?
I don't know. Maybe at the dealership. But if you buy it secondhand, I assume you're not reading any of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I can understand there are certain things where, by using a website, you implicitly accept, certain terms of service. Yeah. If, I don't know, you can imagine how that works. But yeah, that's so messed up. I want to get in people's cars and have sex with them without agreeing to privacy policies. It's frustrating.
I want to, really mess up the data and, just bring me and, a very heavy weight and put it on top of me or, in the same space.
Well, you have to move it around a little.
Yeah, you're right.
So I mentioned this because I wanted to kind of set the stage on the fact that a lot of people are very interested in your sex life.
Yeah.
A lot of people are interested in collecting data about you and your sex life.
Yeah.
And one good example is a lot of people are now interested in figuring out if women are pregnant. Because a lot of states have criminalized things like abortions.
God.
And Peter Thiel, beautiful, wonderful man that he is, has given tens of millions of dollars to invest in women's menstrual apps. Mm-hmm. So already there's been this push to collect women's information covertly.
Yeah.
And now they're, gathering up as much information as they can.
Yeah.
These companies communicate, right? One data set can be compared to another data set. For instance, that Jan has been, buying birth control pills and maybe suddenly she stops. And oh, here's a data point saying Jan got into Michael's car and there might have been a sexual encounter where there was a lot of weight
right
on one seat.
before she stopped buying birth, 4 weeks or 6
Exactly.
weeks or birth control.
But so that's like really interesting. There's a lot of like personal liberty implications tied up in this. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is because of this interesting article I read back in June from Wired. And this was written by Dhruv Mehrotra. It was published, in June of this year. And it's titled, "An Anti-Porn App Put Him in Jail and His Family Under Surveillance." And Wired has just put a pop-up. Can I get past that? Excellent. So the article talks about a gentleman who is now awaiting trial in jail because of an app called Covenant Eyes. The company explicitly says the app is not meant for use in criminal proceedings, but the probation department in Indiana's Monroe County and other counties around the nation has been using it in the past month to surveil not only Hannah's husband, but also the devices of everyone in their family. So Wired is not disclosing their last names. They want to protect these people's privacy. Prosecutors in Monroe County this spring charged Hannah's husband with possession of child sexual abuse material, a serious crime that she says he did not commit and to which he pleaded not guilty. Given the nature, Naomi's looking incredibly shocked. What are you looking at?
Keep going.
Given the nature of the charges, the court ordered that he not have access to any electronic devices as a condition of his pretrial release from jail. To ensure he complied with these terms, the probation department installed Covenant Eyes on Hannah's phone, as well as those of her 2 children and her mother-in-law. In near real time, probation officers are being fed screenshots of everything Hannah's family views on their devices, from images of YouTube videos watched by her 14-year-old to online underwear purchases made by her 80-year-old mother-in-law. The family's entire digital life is scrutinized by county authorities. "I'm afraid to even communicate with our lawyer," Hannah says. "If I mention anything about our case, I'm worried they're going to see it and use it against us."
Oh, God.
So here's the important thing.
Yeah.
This man has not been proven to have actually viewed or possessed child sexual material.
Yeah.
He was accused of such, but it's unclear on what grounds. I don't think they get into it in this article. And there's been a number of cases where, like, people have used their neighbor's Wi-Fi to view child sexual material.
Yeah.
So it's very possible that, like, he is not involved. But prosecutors have given them the ability to prevent this person from accessing content online and has penalized everyone in his family. Everyone in his family now has to have their privacy voided because this person is is accused.
Is under investigation.
Yeah. So there's 2 probation officers in Monroe County that have to scrutinize their web activity. They have to ensure that Hannah's husband does not violate the terms of his bond while using one of his family members' devices. Again, this app claims that they don't allow its software to be used in premeditated legal settings, such as monitoring people on probation. But public spending records, court records, and interviews show that courts in at least 5 U.S. states have used this app to surveil the devices of people who are waiting trial or released on parole. This is really kind of scary. It's very interesting. Fascinating too, the app captures everything visible on the device's screen, taking at least 1 screenshot per minute. It then analyzes them locally before blurring them and saving them to a server. Images the system marks as possibly explicit are flagged for further review. So for instance, one Covenant Eyes report sent to Hannah's husband's probation officer, which Wire reviewed, flagged an online advertisement for a back brace that included a woman in a tank top as possibly concerning. But you can imagine, the wife, for instance, wants to view porn. The grandma wants to view porn. The kids might be receiving explicit text messages or something. And all of this is being captured by local governments, saved on servers, and scrutinized by other people. So all of their privacy is being horribly, horribly violated. It's fascinating and potentially could be spreading to other states around the nation.
Yeah.
But here's the other thing, and this is the crazy, crazy, crazy thing going on in law right now that no one seems to be aware of. Naomi, did you know that accessing Pornhub is now impossible in multiple U.S. states?
Yes, I did know that. It's like Virginia, right? I'm misquoting.
Here's the thing.
But I know it's like at least 3.
Cultural conservatives want people to not watch porn.
Even though they're the highest consumers of porn.
Facts be what they are.
Great.
The other thing is cultural conservatives are trying to redefine pornography to include the mere existence of trans people. There's this incredibly fascinating and concerning document that has been leaked of different conservative think tanks putting together proposals for the next Republican president to work on in his first 100 days of office. And one of the things is literally classifying the existence of trans people as inherently pornographic. So, like, trans people in the United States, per federal law, would not be allowed to go outside. Right? So, like, not only are they trying to crack down on pornography, they're also trying to expand the definition of pornography to allow them to crack down on whatever they don't like.
Yeah.
So Politico had this piece. It was titled "A Simple Law is Doing the Impossible. It is Making the Online Porn Industry Retreat." It is published August 8th of this year by Mark Novikov. So it opens and says, in June 15th, 2022, a freshman legislator in Louisiana's House of Representatives accomplished something no other lawmaker or activist in the country could claim. She passed a law changing the online porn industry. Now, what's interesting is that it was argued not as like a moral thing, but as a public health issue. Pornography is creating a public health crisis and having a corroding influence on minors, asserts the bill that State Rep Laurie Schlegel introduced. No one in the Capitol and Baton Rouge disputes the statement. The bill sailed through the Louisiana House 96-1 and the state Senate 34-0. Keep in mind, Louisiana is very red, but it also has some blue people.
Yeah.
So Democrats voted for this as well. The bill holds pornography websites liable unless the websites perform reasonable age verification methods. In short, requiring users to show government ID to prove they are 18 or older.
Oh my God.
And then the Democratic Governor John Bel Edwards, signed the bill a week after it arrived on his desk. So its age verification bill is not the last. 6 other states have passed nearly identical bills: Arkansas, Montana, Mississippi, Utah, Virginia, and Texas. In Utah and Arkansas, for example, the bills passed unanimously. The bills are passed by overwhelming margins in legislators controlled by both parties and signed into law by Democratic and Republican governors alike. I did say this was passing primarily in conservative states, but it's passing with bipartisan support from both parties. So it's creating havoc in the porn industry, believe it or not. So let's talk about Pornhub. Pornhub is known as the YouTube of pornography. It gets more global users than Amazon or Netflix. In 2019, last year they've released their data. The site was visited 42 billion times, or 115 million times a day. They filed lawsuits. There's something called the Free Speech Coalition. It's the porn industry's trade association. They filed them. They're being fought in court. But in the meantime, porn companies have no choice but to comply. Traffic in Louisiana, according to the private equity company that owns Pornhub, has dropped 80%. In 3 other states where the laws have been in effect for months, Utah, Mississippi, and Virginia, Pornhub did something crazy. It just stopped operating. Users in these states who attempt to visit the site are greeted with a safe-for-work video of Cherry DeVille, clothed, explaining the site's decision to pull out of the state. As the video instructs, some angry porn users have called their legislators, but that does not dim the joy of those legislators who passed this. According to the Utah State Senator Todd Weiler, the chief sponsor of the bill, many of his colleagues are celebrating the improbable and unexpected retreat of the pornography behemoth. Wheeler says his colleagues think it's hilarious and have been high-fiving each other in boyish triumph. So then the article talks about like the origins of this. It did not actually start, as far as they understand, through like some conservative think tank. It started actually potentially on the Howard Stern show, which is very weird. But one of the things it talks about is, the porn industry is arguing this is still going to allow minors to view porn.
Yeah.
There's a lot of easy ways that people can like access VPNs these days. Mm-hmm. There's lots of easy ways you can spoof your location. There's all these companies that like advertise the existence of VPNs on YouTube. I get like 50 ads for NordVPN on YouTube and like podcasts every single week. So like it's not actually going to stop young people from viewing porn. It also creates some incredible free speech concerns because now every single person who wants to watch porn has their ID captured and the information stored by a private company.
Ew.
Remember how we just talked about the idea companies are gathering your information and selling it? I'm not saying Pornhub's going to do it, but every porn company needs to comply.
Yeah. Every
porn company. That includes a lot of companies that are far less scrupulous about like losing users. Yeah. Well, that's a tough sentence to say. There's a lot of companies out there that host videos that want to find a new revenue stream because they realize you can't make money hosting porn videos without doing something other than like banner ads for Uber Eats or whatever they're offering these days. So this has really, 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 really concerning implications, because we've talked earlier about how a lot of people in like the no-fap movement and online are becoming increasingly critical of pornography. We've talked about how companies are trying to gather as much data on you as possible and criminalizing a lot of people's behavior. And now we're seeing this has bipartisan repercussions as people are trying to, quote unquote, stop a public health crisis. But now this has problems for free speech. This has problems for people's self-representation. This has problems in the real world that trickle down and impact us all. And what I'm concerned with is that there's going to be very few people standing up and being like, I'm a proud porn watcher and I love my porn and I don't want any of this, because it's an embarrassing thing. It's not something we talk a lot about in public. It's something everyone kind of implicitly understands their neighbors do, but it's also not something that like anyone really wants to talk about in graphic detail unless they're conversing with weirdos on the internet. So yeah, I think we need to be critical of people who are out there talking about how dangerous porn is, because I think there's plenty of reasonable criticisms of the industry. I think we can have all sorts of discussions like they have in the book Revolting Prostitutes, which we've discussed, where like, unfortunately, if you want to make money, if you're down on your luck in America, one of the only ways to do that is through filming porn. And for better or for worse, a lot of people turn to that. And that follows them their entire life.
I didn't even think about OnlyFans. How many people make their entire income on OnlyFans?
That's a really interesting point. And you're right. You know, certain red states have incredibly high porn consumption. So you can imagine this having a detritus effect on people who rely on income from 50 states and around the world. So yeah, I think other states are probably going to pick this up, and I think that if you're concerned about this, as I am, for both the free speech issues and the idea that the government is capturing your information, and the fact this is getting in the way of a good time, contact your legislators, let them know this sucks, don't criminalize the internet, there's enough going on in the world, don't let them ruin the place we yell at each other online and consume cooking videos and learn about car crashes in Phoenix.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that brings pleasure to my cold, cold heart. Yeah.
Listeners, I hope you have a great week. Wear a condom and don't buy a new Subaru.
Whoa. The first anti-ad we've done. Yeah, no, that's good advice. Listeners, thanks for sticking with us. Thanks for listening to our horrible audio quality. Just a heads up, we have a Patreon. We have exclusive content on the Patreon. You know all that. You've been listening to our episodes. If you can't afford our Patreon, we totally gets it. Just please give us a like and review on whatever podcast app you're using, or do it on multiple podcast apps. They can't stop you for that. These companies, man, they come in here, they ruin everything. We have to abide by their system. Introduce some anarchy, man. Fight the power
For real.
The potential RICO charges for activists who fight the power. I don't know where I'm going with this. Naomi, shall we call it?
Let's call it. Have a great week.
Strong stuff here, boy. Wow. What exactly you have wrong? You need all this stuff.
Motherfucker.
What?
Motherfucker. You
What are you talking
fucking asshole. Who the fuck are you? Who the
Oh, look,
fuck
lady, I'm
do
just
you
trying-
think
I'm
you
just
are?
trying to
I
make
come in
conversation.
here. You don't know me. You don't know who
Look,
I am, what my
you don't
life
have
is,
to-
and you have the balls,
You don't
the
have-
decency to ask me a question about my life?
Yes, lady, what?
Fuck you too! Don't you call me lady! I come in here, I give these things to you. You check, you make your phone calls, look suspicious, ask questions. I'm sick! I have sickness all around me, and you fucking ask me my life? What's wrong? I'm using death in your bed, in your house. Where's your fucking decency? And then I'm asked fucking questions. What's wrong? Suck my dick. That's what's wrong in you. You fucking call me lady? Shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on both of you.
We have many thanks for the use of our theme music, which is the song Drop by Ketsa. You can find more of their music online at ketsa.uk. You can also find Date These Guys online on Twitter and Instagram at @DateTheseGuys, or visit datetheseguys.org. If you have questions for the podcast or want to be a wealthy sugar parent, please send an email to datetheseguys@gmail.com. If you'd like to support our work, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/datetheseguys. We have behind-the-scenes information, early episode access, participation in polls, and exclusive access to a guy sibling map of date ideas for the Arizona area. Since the world sucks right now, we are currently donating all Patreon proceeds to trans organizations like Trevor Project, a trans suicide prevention organization, and moving assistance funds for those fleeing states outlawing their very existence. Please consider becoming a member and supporting our work today.